As I said, INE is turning 12 this year. And if you see this picture here, it looks kind of like a Star Wars poster or an Avengers movie poster. It's because these are our Avengers, people who we think are really cool and have really influenced the Institute throughout the 12 years that we've been around. And these are mentors of ours, people who are close friends of the Institute. And so we're putting on this speaker series as a way to have them kind of talk to us about the work that they're doing and how it's impacted us here at the Institute. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. So at INE, we're a movement building institute. We're a research and training center, and we work with community organizations, mass protest organizations, but also with people who are working in personal transformation and building towards historical analysis that can help people do the work, the craft of movement building better, right? We also work with indigenous elders in Latin America on indigenous wisdom and building relationships and bridges between their communities and social movement communities here as well. Oh, thank you so much. I was like, where is that? Great. So we're really honored today to be with Alexandra and Tom Piñeros Shields, who are going to be, yes, please. Thank you. They're going to be leading a workshop today on PAR, Participatory Action Research. Dr. Alexandra Piñeros Shields identifies as a midwife for power and has organized in Latino communities for many years. Currently, she is an associate professor and directs the Master of Public Policy program at the Heller School at Brandeis University. She teaches courses on immigration policy, economic justice, and participatory action research, which is what we're going to be learning about today. Prior to joining the Heller faculty, she was the executive director of the Essex County Community Organization, ECHO, which is an interfaith network of 40 congregations organizing for racial and economic justice. Over her 35 career in the Boston area, Dr. Piñeros Shields has worked with Black and immigrant communities to dismantle mass incarceration in the criminal legal system and the immigrant detention system. Dr. Piñeros Shields serves as the chair of the board of the Massachusetts Budget and Policy Center and on the boards of the ACLU of Massachusetts and Philanthropy Massachusetts. Dr. Tom Piñeros Shields is an associate professor of politics, policy, and international relations at Salem State University and the founding director of the North Shore Policy Lab, where he engages students in participatory, community-based research and learning projects. For almost three decades, Dr. Piñeros Shields built university community partnerships through action research projects in Lowell, New York City, East St. Louis, and with SIM, the Student Immigrant Movement. Welcome, welcome. He has also managed and collected and analyzed data for quantitative and qualitative evaluations to prove and improve youth-based community programs in the areas of civic engagement and service learning and higher education. Thomas earned a BS from Cornell University and an MA from Tufts University, and his doctorate in the Joint Sociology Social Policy program at Brandeis University. His dissertation was Ethnography of the Student Immigrant Movement that explained how Dreamers emerged as new political actors. Tom and Alexandra have been longtime friends of the Institute, and of course we're also really happy that their daughter Isabella has been working with the Institute now for about 6 months. So thank you, Isabella, and Tom and Alexandra. A couple more things before I hand it over to Tom and Alexandra. I don't want to take up too much of the time, but important things to invite everybody here too. The first one, here in this exact same spot, we're going to have Kazu Haga, who's also a longtime friend of the Institute's, who focuses more on the area of personal transformation. He has a new book that's coming out that's called Fierce Vulnerability, and we're going to have an event here which is going to be April 15th at night for his book launch. And then the next day is being a whole day workshop here. So if that's something that interests you, this is particularly around emotional resilience and how to build that, particularly within the context of mass actions and mass protests. We are also having another workshop. This will be online on May 6th. And this is kind of about realignment, living in populist times, exploring political de-alignment and realignment. This is led by James Hayes and Stuart McIntyre. And then lastly, we're going to have a participatory defense workshop led by Justine Tasmore of the National Council. This will be May 15th, 2025. And this is about how organizations are organizing themselves to defend people who are facing incarceration or the criminal justice system. Okay, so there's more events that are part of our speaker series. There's going to hopefully be 12 events, but these are the next ones that we have coming up, and we invite you all to attend all of them. Some are online, some are in person. These 2 are online, and we hope to see you at CASAS here in person at the training center. Okay, one last thing. Our next free workshop. So we've been having a series of free workshops that are all offered online. Our next one's going to be on our framework of movement ecology, which is about the foundational theories of change, the 5 foundational theories of change, basically different ways that people look at change and how they relate to each other. Our next one's going to be on April 24th from 12 to 2. Okay, and it's going to be facilitated by Carlos. So if you want to learn about movement ecology and how this applies to you and your work, you can sign up online. They're all free. We hope to see you there on April 24th. Okay, trainings. We have, I know there's a lot of things that we have coming up, but in terms of the next things that we have in terms of long-form trainings that we have at the Institute, Seasons of Leadership is coming up in April. If you're not part of that one, that training, yeah, there you go. That training is already closed in terms of applications, but if you have an interest in exploring your seasons and cycles, we're having another training that's going to be at the Watershed Center in Millerton, New York on September 18th through 20th. Okay, so if you're interested in that, go to our website, sign up on the interest form. Those are getting filled up fast. Okay, so I advise you to sign up as quickly as possible if you can. And if you have questions, you can talk to Fatima at any point today about those. She'll be happy to talk to you about the training. The next training that we're having here in this very building is going to be a week long from June 2nd to 7th. It's on movement strategy intensive. Okay, it's an advanced training. It's kind of like a boot camp. We're going to be going really deep into our movement building curriculum and then talking about ways to integrate all those frameworks and things into the campaigns and projects that we're doing. And then last but not least, our newest training that we are launching is going to be held towards the end of the year from December 8th to 13th. And it's on the long view. It's an advanced political education training where we're basically going to be going through 5,000 to 6,000 years of history in a week so we can grasp really the root of our problems and how to transcend them. We're deeply influenced here at the Institute by the work and framework of this Japanese philosopher called Kojin Karatani. And we're going to be exploring that framework and other ones so that we can really understand the history of how we got here and kind of how we can transcend our current social formation. Okay, without further ado, if you want more information about any of this stuff, you can go to www.ine.institute. I want to pass it over now to Tom and Alexandra. Thank you all so much. We're honored to have you here.
Thank you, Sergio.
Here you go.
Thank you. It was working. There we go. All right. This is really a bit of a dream to come back to this space with all of you. And I think in these times, it just kind of reinforces how important INE, spaces like INE and this space in particular are to be able to come together, to plan together, maybe at times to grieve together, to imagine together, to plan action, and to have spaces of courage. And I'm just so appreciative of Carlos and Fatima and Sergio and everyone at INE who are, Rodrigo, and who are here and who have created this space. So I want to thank you for all of your work and all of these amazing trainings that are coming. I said, my name's Tom Piñeros Shields. I've been working in the area of participatory action research and community-based research for 30-something years. My first projects were with Cambodian refugees, and in fall of 1989, spring of 1989, in the fall, I was doing work in Queens and New York. And so have done a lot of things since, but I let Alexandra, if you want to introduce yourself, if you had a story to say.
I resonate with everything that you've said, Tom. It's an honor to be here. And Tom and I have had many conversations over the years that our people need a Highlander of the North. And here we are, the Highlander of the North, a place that sacred ground for reimagining the world, like folks in Tennessee had over so many decades. So thank you for creating the Highlander of the North. Yeah.
So we'd like to begin by getting to know you. This is an area on participatory action research. This, by the way, is a photograph we took last year when we were in Machu Picchu. So, and thought it was. I'm not sure I'm going the right way.
It's the one facing down, the arrow down.
Ah, there we are. Okay, great. So whenever folks hear the term research, a lot of different ideas come to mind. We're talking about participatory action research. So I want you to just start with, if you could take out a piece of paper, we're going to ask everyone to just take a minute or two to draw a picture of what a researcher looks like. And what does a researcher look like?
What's in your mind?
What's on your mind? And I'm going to ask you to then, we're going to ask everyone to just quickly introduce themselves and describe what you've drawn. So maybe 2 minutes or so. Great. Again, this doesn't have to be a final work. We can come back to it if you do want to expand your creative, artistic images of a researcher. But I'd just love to hear, could I invite you to share what a researcher looks like? And at the same time, we want to get a sense of who's in the room. So if you could share your name as well. I don't know where to start. Popcorn, anyone that would like to volunteer? Yes.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Carolina, and my researcher didn't have space, but he looks like a little kid with a big suit. But I was just thinking the typical white long coat, white male, short hair, glasses, just very casual underneath the white coat and like a little badge.
Great.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Carolina.
I'm Valentina. A researcher looks like my grandma, actually. My grandma is not an academic researcher, but she is a researcher to me. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Valentina.
My name is Aditi, she and they pronouns interchangeably. I drew just like a little stick figure of a person who is standing like this, as just someone who is asking questions, with a thought bubble that has a lot of question marks in it, a researcher, and then some words that came to mind were considerate, curious, grounded, intentional, and humble.
Wow, nice. Thank you, Aditi.
I'm Kayla. I will not show you my drawing. I'm not a great drawer. But I just drew someone, imagine someone like in a lab, more of your standard image. But I also, the words that came to mind were removed, sort of isolated within their own space, but not necessarily interacting with the subjects or the things in which they are studying.
Thank you, Kayla.
I'm Cam. Any pronouns are fine. So I was similar. I did the question marks, and I'm thinking of more so from like a historian perspective. I had one professor who shared, like, historians ask the questions that nobody cares about. Like they ask the questions that no one cares what the answer is to. And I did it more from like an archivist perspective of like lots of papers and books and going through the archives.
Nice. Thank you, Cam.
My name is Diana, she, her. I also I think a researcher is anyone, so it was just hard. I don't think that we look like anything specific. I think that it's all of us. I think that it's someone who's curious, who listens to people, who watches, who explores, and who admires humanity.
Diana, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
So I drew a picture of a lot of different people. I have a grown-up sitting cross-legged with a notepad and a pencil, interacting with a child who has a thought bubble, a mouth, and lots of question marks. So the child is asking questions. The researcher has extra big ears. The researcher is a listener. And then there are other kids playing ball under a tree. There's a bunny rabbit. There's a cat curled up. And this is all happening near the shore of a river where there's Mental drawing.
Wow.
There's a canoe, like, there's so many different ways to learn and to connect, but you always have to keep your ears really big and listen. So I think that's the most important for me.
Fantastic.
Thank
And your
you.
name?
Ping An, sorry.
Ping An.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ping An.
Yes.
Hi everyone, I'm Dylan. I had an inquisitive person with a pen and a clipboard.
Thank you, Dylan.
I'm Rita, and my pronoun are she series, and I just had a lot of different people, some with sticks, some made of circle bodies and rectangle bodies, and they all have like sound waves coming out of them, and they're synthesizing. I read the word synthesizing information that's going on this little omnipotent blackboard. Blackboard synthesizes all
Nice,
these.
nice.
Great.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Dan. I draw a person with a few books and question marks, stuff like that.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Bell, she, hers. So I was thinking of all the researchers that I've met, and they always have glasses. So they definitely
Well, there you go.
and a notebook and just curiosity, I would say, with a smile. Always, so.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm Fanan. I drew just a child observing the world. I think people are inherently curious in observing the world and learning by observing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Who's left? There's a few folks. Carlos.
Hello, I'm Carlos Hijem. I'm not going to show you my picture, but what I thought initially, maybe because it's tax season, was a tax auditor as a researcher.
Well, scary. Scary than white coats. Thank you.
My name is Elise. I drew someone also wearing glasses, near a computer and a lot of books.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise.
Of course.
I'm Hannah, usually in her pronouns, and I just drew a lot of question marks because I think anybody who has a question can be a researcher.
That's it. Yeah, thank you.
Fatima, she, her, and I drew someone with glasses and then with a book, and this is how you know me thinking of research as a child, because it's a computer, but it's the old boxy computers. So I was thinking mostly, I think, of like the tools I used to use to research when I was younger.
Awesome.
Thank you.
My name's Madeline, and I basically mimicked what a lot of people have said, but I'm also thinking of librarians and people who are researchers on behalf of others, educators also.
Thank you, Madeline. Yeah. So,
We have
Oh, I went already.
Sergio.
Hi everyone, my name is Sergio, he, him pronouns, and I kind of just drew somebody in a library reading a bunch of things, so also kind of a librarian.
Nice. Isabella.
I just drew a little person with a question mark, so yeah, just anyone who's curious about the world.
Thank you. It looks like we're done. We can leave. Yeah, pretty much. We're done.
So now we know what research is. We're a lot of what you said actually echoed where we're going. Look, wrong way. Down. I'm going to learn.
Oh, yes. You have one more slide.
So yeah, echoing what some of you already said, we're all researchers, and part of the principles of what we want to talk about today is participatory action research, which is a form of democratizing knowledge construction. It is a way to shift the typical paradigm of the white coat, right, person with glasses, scary tax auditor who comes in and takes extractive knowledge, and we want to suggest that there is this approach that is a little different, that's radically different, as a matter of fact. And since birth, we're organizing and classifying information. Little babies are drawing knowledge in. They're trying to figure out the world. They're reconstructing that knowledge. Since birth, we're trying to understand the world around us. And since birth, we are all asking questions. We all do research every day, to be curious, to be engaged. I think some of you said that we all have that innate instinct. And so as we sort of build on that, we want to start today. We have 4 things we want to talk about today, 4 things we want to talk about together. The first is we want to ask the question of why would anyone do participatory action research? Situate this within the context. Then answer the question of the definition of what is participatory action research. We're going to give a few examples. We have 4 projects, 2 of which we've done, and the other 2 are projects that we just are really impressed by, so we're going to go through a few examples. And then we want to get you hands-on engaged in developing research questions, starting the process of doing PAR, which really begins with defining a question, so collectively. So we're going to be working at the tables at the end of the day using a technique called question formulation technique. And I'm going to turn over to Alexandra now, who's going to talk about why. Why are we here? What are we doing?
Yeah, and I guess I would add one thing is that the activity that you just did comes from a wonderful curriculum for PAR that was developed by an organizing group in New York City called Take Root Justice. So we'll give you the website, and it's a whole curriculum. And that activity is really important to do with community folks, because you all know that but sometimes in the community, because people have been oppressed and their knowledge has been suppressed, the way that you see it, they don't see it that way. And so maybe the hardest thing to do when you're working with the community is to convince them that they are actually researchers, that they can do research. So this is activity we use all the time with community. So why PAR? So I'm an organizer. And I've organized for many, many years. And organizers, we always talk about power. And so I wanted to start with power because what we want to present today is that PAR is a tool for organizing, right? And that curriculum is a curriculum that has that perspective also. And so there are lots of theories about power. If you're organizers, you've talked about power. I want to talk about a framework for understanding power that was developed by John Gaventa. He was an organizer in Appalachia, and he wrote a brilliant book called Power and Powerlessness. And in his work with coal miners in Appalachia, he developed 3 dimensions. So the first dimension of power, there at the bottom of this upside down triangle, is who wins and who loses in whatever game. So let's say an election. There's an election, one candidate wins, one loses. Who wins and who loses? It could be the economy, who's winning in the economy and who's losing. Any kind of contest. The second dimension are the rules of the game that will dictate who wins and who loses, right? So in our election example, we know that there are many ways in which we kind of control who's going to win and who's going to lose, right? We draw governments, officials draw lines to create voting regions, right? We call it gerrymandering. They oftentimes purposely cut through black communities to divide the black vote, or Latino communities to divide our power. There are voter suppression laws. So I have friends in Georgia who were telling me that last election, some counties in western Georgia made rules that buses couldn't come within 10 miles of a voting booth, right? To prevent poor people without cars from voting, to prevent black folks from voting. So voter suppression laws. Second dimension. The Electoral College dictates who's going to win and who's going to lose. We could go on and on and on. But you understand, right? The second dimension are the rules, the policies of a society that control who wins and who loses at the first level. And then the third level of power are the narratives a society has that justifies everything. So for example, the Statue of Liberty, pulling yourself up by your bootstrap, the American dream, If you're not making it in the United States, it's your own damn fault, because this is the land of opportunity. So something must be wrong with you, right? Those narratives that justify the winners and the losers. So in the election example, what is the narrative? What's the myth? Yeah.
That the person who won because everybody supported them.
Yeah. Good. And
there are only two sides.
okay.
Or options.
Yeah. And this has to do with really big narratives like the Statue of Liberty. So I suggest that one possible way to think about it is the United States is a democracy. That's the justification for it all. Not only are we a democracy, we are so good at democracy that we go to other countries to observe their, no, it's not that we're a democracy, we're the best democracy. We're so good at democracy, we export it. That's how good we are at democracy. And if some black folks in Georgia can't vote, well, that's just an anomaly, right? It's the exception to the rule, because the rule is that we're a democracy. Now, in this moment, things are becoming very clear. But let's say a year ago, we could say this, and most people say, yes, the United States is a democracy, right? So that's the myth. Now, why am I showing you this? Because whoever controls this controls everything. And this is about narrative. So I think we need to engage in narrative combat. That is a term I did not make up. It is from Jabari Asim, who is a professor at Emerson, a writing professor, African-American writing professor. Narrative combat. It is about battling ideas. And so we want to suggest to you that doing research and having people who are oppressed developing their own knowledge will enable them to control narratives and generate knowledge at the third dimension. So the rest of the 2 hours we have, we're going to be talking about third dimension. We're going to be talking about power. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, great. So, yeah, all agree, right? Knowledge is power. So right now, research is about knowledge generation, knowledge production. So it is about power. And not only is it about power, it's about power at the third dimension. In the curriculum that I've mentioned, they talk about 3 different ways to think about power, right? We've got 3 ways to think about knowledge. We have experiential knowledge, right? Which is everybody's life experiences provide knowledge over time. As we get older, we have more and more knowledge, just because we're living, right? What you get through living. You have community knowledge, the knowledge that your ancestors passed down from generation to generation, or your own personal family history, right? So that's community knowledge. And then academic knowledge, books. And what PAR researchers believe is that all of these have the same value. And maybe in some cases, the first 2 have more value, right? But the world would have us believe that what university professors produce, that's knowledge, and the other stuff is not really knowledge. But we want to privilege experiential and community knowledge. Another assumption is that power is in the people, right? So we are operating today under 2 assumptions, that knowledge is power and that power is in the people. This is what Anyi is day in and day out, what you're working to teach all of us. So one of the questions that arises is how can we liberate the power people have? There are many ways. Much of that can be learned here. One way to liberate the power of people is through this tool, Participatory Action Research. So people's knowledge will equal the people's agenda, will equal people's power.
Okay. So we've talked about why PAR. Now let's talk about what is this thing, Participatory Action Research. And there are, just to say, there are many definitions of Participatory Action Research. We are not inventing something new. It has been around a long time. But one of the ways in which when working with communities that we use the definition, we'll use a definition such as this one. Oppressed people work collectively to generate knowledge by interrogating the conditions of their exploitation and then use their own knowledge to liberate themselves. Does anyone see anything in this that jumps out at them? Any words on this definition? Does it resonate, anything? Seems okay? Collective, yeah. So this is a collective process? I heard 2 of you said that, I think.
Use their own knowledge, use their own knowledge also, just recognizing that it is inherent to the communities.
Yeah, we're not empowering people. The power is there, the knowledge is there. Anyhow.
Yeah, I think that's what stands out to me, that it is a process that comes from within. It seems to be like a way of realization of what is already available in the community, used to like liberate from what is oppressing externally.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Anything else? So, anyway, so Patricia McGuire, who's one of the leader scholars of feminist participatory action research in particular, has broken down the definition of participatory action research into these 3 components. And you'll notice that each of the elements of participatory action and research have kind of a piece of this definition. So the first part is a method of social investigation of problems involving participation of ordinary people in problem posing and solving. The idea is it's not just the folks in the white coats. It's not just the people with 3 letters after their name who are doing this research. But it is a method of social investigation. It is a form of research that we're talking about. It's knowledge creation. There's a long history of this. We have brought part of not our entire library, but a large part of our library related to participatory action research. This is Patricia McGuire's book from 30 years ago or so. Plus, it's a little rough, but read it many times. So we're drawing from this idea of the different approaches to participatory action research. The second part of the definition involves a lot of what you do here at INE. It's leadership development, it's consciousness raising, it's educational, and it's an educational process for the co-participants, researchers and participants who analyze structural causes of named problems through collective discussion and interaction, coming together to define and co-create knowledge and to build a sense of participation. One of the things that we like to talk about is the way in which this becomes a tool also for organizers, right? Of building the consciousness, of building these skills and the power within a group. And third, it's also a way for researchers and people marginalized from access to join in solidarity to take collective action, both short-term and long-term, for radical social change. That's the action component. So when you bring these together, you've got research, participation, and action. Reorder that into participatory action research. It often falls in this direction.
Tom, can you ask a question?
Oh, yeah.
I have a question. On the last slide, can you talk about, just because name problems is bolded, and so I'm curious if you can talk about the importance of those, like that adjective of named.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in this one, it's part of this, I think, is acknowledging the process of defining and articulating that problem rather than a problem being imposed. We also recognize that there are problems that people haven't named, and they don't necessarily go away. But in this case, it's getting specific about this is the problem that we're identifying. Yeah, I'm not sure why McGuire actually emboldened that, but it's essentially, but it basically is about going through the process of defining the problems together. And the first step in the research process is really coming to a shared understanding collectively of this is what the problem is that we're addressing, which is, I think, what the activity is we're going to spend most of the second hour working on. So that'll be that. Yeah.
I was wondering, like, the named problems, is it because, like, there, like, communities can have, like, I'm thinking about, like, cosecha
Yes.
organizing. Like, cosecha has an overarching goal of, like, a 7-day strike of all of the 11+ million undocumented immigrants.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like, I know cosecha in Massachusetts, like, there was this, like, social investigation of the problems people in the immigrant community are facing. And then there was this collective decision to work on licenses for all. And that was like a multi-year collective action project. So I'm just more so thinking of, like, this is what we as a community have decided to be this, like, one name problem that intersects with a lot of other ones that we're not ignoring, but, like, to tackle one at a time, I guess. I don't know, it's like a way to probably avoid burnout.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. And I would also say that, name problems suggest these are socially constructed. We are creating and identifying these problems together. And so I think that in the case of cosecha, they're articulating something that maybe others aren't, it's not like problems are just out there waiting. We have to take action to collectively co-construct and co-define the problems as
Towards
groups.
a solution.
Yeah, towards a solution.
Yeah, towards.
One of the things we like to also emphasize is that this approach to research, as we did in the introduction, is very different from what we think of as conventional research. And this is a simplified version of this chart. I'm not going to get into paradigms. You made me promise I wouldn't go into this. But there are multiple research approaches and paradigms. Conventional research tends to focus on just understanding the problem, whereas participatory action research is seeking to make change towards our mutual liberation. It's going beyond now we know there's a problem. We want to go further. Who is the research for? Many researchers come from universities. They do their studies. We have a colleague, Randy Coates, who was saying that we go into the community as sociologists every year and we say the community is in trouble, and then they leave and they come back a year later and they say, actually, it's getting worse. These problems in this community are getting worse. And then they leave and they come back a year later and say, actually, it's really critical. The community is in dire conditions, and they leave and they come back a year later and like, I think the community is dying. Now, if they were doctors, if sociologists were doctors, they would all lose their license. They keep coming back and coming back and coming back and watching these communities' problems continue. Conventional research, as a sociologist, I'm criticizing this, but the idea is that for participatory action research, it's not just something that is this professional interest. People living in the communities own the research at the end. And whose knowledge counts, it's not only the folks with the 3 letters after their names, it's also all participants have knowledge that contributes, deep knowledge that's inherent in the community. And how do we decide? Well, these decisions of what to research should come from local priorities, not what the funders say, not this is the hot new thing, not what the institutions or the professional advancement requirements say, but it really should be coming from what do you need today, here, and now. And so that's kind of a distinction kind of research we're trying to do. I'm trying to do at the North Shore Policy Lab. We're trying to do in general. Okay. This is something that when we ask community members, we get different answers. So I want to ask you a question of, there's a whole set of steps when we ask, how do we do participatory action research? There's a lot of parts to this. And we wonder, do you really believe, do a gut check, do you really believe what we're saying here? Do you really believe that anyone can do this or that community members can do this? So when we're asking, like, who gets to decide to do the research? Raise your hands if you think that the community can do this. Okay. Developing a research question. Do you think the community can and should be doing this? Does anyone think, no? Okay. How about selecting the methods, deciding how to study it? Yeah. Anyone think that we should leave that just to, okay. Collecting data. Can everyone collect data, or do we have to just have analyzing the data? Don't you need advanced degrees for this? No? Okay. Writing up the research results. Raise your hands if you think that everyone can do this, the community can read. Right. And presenting the research at the end. Okay. So,
question.
Yes.
So, I mean, yes, but is there it also a myth of what's credible, you know?
Is it a myth of what's credible? Yeah, so part of the reason why I brought a library of books here is to show that you actually can get published books through community-based research, that there is scholarship out there that is credible in this field. Now, are there people in, I don't know, white coats sitting at universities in the area who will say that's just journalism? Yes, there are.
Yeah.
Are there scholars who will dismiss this, who say we're not publishing this type of research? We need you to really, define your data set. We need to have this sort of like all sorts of things. But yeah, so we're within the institutions, we're trying to transform those institutions too. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to also answer, Gloribel. 25 years ago when I started my dissertation, maybe I should tell that story when it's my turn, but like nobody was doing PAR 25 years ago. I would say, yeah, like it's really hard. This past year, I got funding from the Social Security Administration to do participatory action research. Really odd. Like I'm like, oh my God.
Pre-Musk.
Pre-Trump. Pre-Trump. And also, I got funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to do participatory action research with undocumented immigrant landlords. So over the last 25 years, there's growing acceptance. But his answer is also true, but there is growing acceptance.
Yes.
It's interesting, though, back to your question, Gloribel, and just thinking about, like, I'm trying to think about research that's done well and research that's done badly, and that can happen in academic settings and also at the community setting.
Yes.
So I'm curious, and probably the reason we're here is to figure out, like, well, how do you do it well?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
And unfortunately, we only have 2 hours, but I will say.
My bag, I'm spending the night.
Because it is a long process. One of the books over there is the Participatory Action Research dissertation, and they lay out a series of validity measures. How do we judge whether or not PAR is good PAR or not PAR? And I think it's a better question of it than is this participatory action research or not.
I have
But yeah.
to say, just as a resident of Boston, I feel like the city of Boston has been trying to incorporate PAR
Yes, they have.
heavily, but I don't think they do a very good job of it.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, well, we asked all of you, and
Right.
so we now made our decision. I'm like, you already knew what you wanted to do before you asked any of us.
It almost feels like they're doing it as a concession rather than like a
Yeah.
genuine.
Or
Yes.
maybe they're genuinely trying, they just don't have the time and the resources or the knowledge.
Oh, and they don't know how to do it.
Yeah, it's just like.
I mean, I have
that's
so many.
almost worse than not doing
I mean, having been involved in the process,
Yeah.
I would say they defined the framework and
Yes.
imposed it on the community versus it being truly participatory.
Right.
Yeah, it
That's
could
how
be
I saw it.
co-opted, just like anything can be co-opted.
Right.
Of course, PAR can be co-opted.
I mean, and when you funnel through things through that framework and you sort of whittle it down and then it becomes here are your choices, well, that's a different thing.
Yep.
It's 100%, and I think that as I said, there's a lot to unpack with this conversation. It feels like it's a really rich one, and I'd love for us to come back or have more time to talk. We can continue that part of it, but there are any number of examples of great PAR, and I want to get to those in a second. But first, kind of looking back before looking forward. This is not a new idea. Oftentimes considered the father of participatory action research is Orlando Falls-Borda, who was Colombian. And a lot of his work was actually gathering groups together into institutions. There's another, Cowards Don't Make History. Did you have that one? Oh, good. This is an amazing, it came out in 2020. This book just digs into the experiences of Orlando Falls-Borda, and he was deeply influenced into all that was happening in Latin America in the 1960s and 70s with liberation theology, and we had Paulo Freire and Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and Ignacio Martin Boró and Augusto Boal, and so you have this within Latin America there was this sort of milieu of ideas that were moving and transforming the idea of knowledge construction, and Falls-Borda popularized this, really kind of gained national attention for PAR. But even that, in 2001, he was describing this was happening as a reaction to post-colonial experiences around the world, independently. Efforts at institutional reconstruction of this type went on independently and almost simultaneously in different continents without any one of us being aware of what our colleagues were doing. So he found evidence of Similar participation in research in India, in West Africa, in other parts of the world where people had experienced this idea of we're the experts and we're coming in to do this research with you, and having these like false choices of research and saying, no, let's find a way to do this better. Let's find a way to really kind of emphasize this kind of participation. And I have so much to think about when we talk about doing this better, because we're not trained very often to do this. When you're in a PhD program, you're often told, well, this is a great idea. You can do it when you get tenure. So you never actually learn during your program how to do this. You're kind of dismissed, and you're told this will be career suicide. And so academia needs a lot of help right now. They're
Which gets back to the three types of power that you were talking
That's
about,
right.
the third dimension.
Yeah. That's right. So maybe part of what we want to do is highlight some of the examples where we think they're doing it really well. And the first one is an example from, I was on a panel with Yasser Payne last year, who's the lead author, professor of sociology and criminal justice at the University of Delaware. Go to his piece first. And he put together, he calls it the People's Report. They're doing what they call street research.
Street par.
Street par. And it's research for power, surveys, interviews, community assessments. And part of what Yasser Payne, he said this on the panel last year, is that, people would talk about this, oh, this is soft, this is just, glory pile. This isn't respected research. But he's like, well, what does it take to do respected research? Oh, surveys? We can teach people how to do surveys. So he set up classes, and he's teaching local community residents in Wilmington, Delaware, how to do survey analysis, how to do the quantitative analysis that they can then publish as reports and publish together. And so he's developing the capacity of the community. It's not only waiting there. This work, the website here, there's a short video. We're going to skip that, though, now. I think we're way behind on schedule. This amazing, this is one of the best examples I know of happening right now in terms of PAR. So I wanted to share that. Another one, maybe we can look at this video.
Okay.
Okay. This is, you were going to talk about this, right?
I like the way you got to give them the nod.
I don't know what's the faces of power right there.
It's really that I'm good with time. That's really, it's just that I'm good with time.
I know, it's not broadcasting. I don't know what. Hey.
There you go. I don't know what the next one is.
There you go.
This one, right?
Yeah. Let's go full screen. There you go.
Just the audio. You were playing it, right?
I started.
Yeah, you couldn't hear it.
No.
I could tell a story. I meant to open with a story
Yeah, I
while
was
they're
waiting
doing
for
it.
that.
Yeah, I totally forgot. So 25 years ago, I had just started being a graduate student. I was a doctoral student, and I was at the copier machine. It's where you meet people. And the water bottle. And I had spent that first semester trying to find, right before I started the PhD, I heard about PAR and had never heard about it, and I wanted to learn it. And I asked my professor in research methods class that I wanted to do my project using PAR, and he said, what's that? And so nowhere in the university at Brandeis. And then I looked at every single university in the Boston area, and no one was teaching PAR. No one. And I was really desperate. I was like, I guess I'm just going to have to figure this out myself. And I was at the copier machine, and this person walked up. Tom walked up to me, and he did. And he's like, hi, I'm Tom. He had just started working there as a researcher. And I said, hi. And he's like, what are you? I was like, I'm a doctoral student. He's like, oh, what's your dissertation going to be about? And I said, oh, I want to do PAR. And he burst out laughing. And I was like, fuck this. Like, who does he think he is? This white guy laughing at me. I was really annoyed. I was like, and I said, why are you laughing? I was very serious. And he said, well, in PAR, you give your power over to the community, but as a doctoral student, you give your power to the professors that are on your committee. So you're going to have to be responding to two sources of power. And don't you want to get done? And I was like, shit, he knows what he's talking about. Like, I finally found someone who knows something about PAR. And now we're married.
Thank you, dear. So, in Holyoke, I had been working a lot with young people also, but I hadn't heard of them until you found them. So,
yeah, this is great.
Let's hear.
We'll send out all of these links and other things that we couldn't, so that you'll all have them.
So, I mean, you saw one of the things they were doing is narrative combat, right? They were not only taking the sign down, okay, that's one thing, that's a structural change, but then they didn't want to forget that they had won this fight. And so they made sure that they put this in the sign itself in display with a description of what they had done. So it's not just a structural change, not just a win and a loss or rules. It's actually also something that they move forward through the future.
And the photographs that they took and researched of those individuals, that's also a narrative shift of who's successful, right? Yeah. That's that third dimension. These kids were engaging in third dimension work, which is really powerful.
So I started a project about 10 years ago with the Latino Leadership Coalition of Greater Salem area. We did something called Photo Voice. Photo Voice is a technique in which we put back in the day, we used to give little box cameras, the disposable cameras, to everyone who would go, and then we'd collect them and get them developed.
He's been doing PAR for a long time.
I was doing this, that was back in the 90s when we used to give out like little cameras to people. Now, of course, everyone has a phone, and it's great. But so we had folks go out and take pictures, and we gave them instructions. We had a team of Latino members of the Salem community who had gathered, wanted to do this project. They wanted to answer the question of what does it mean to be Latino, Latina in Salem? That was their question. And the purpose of this was, again, a way to reaffirm their community, which they often were feeling wasn't being recognized. So the instructions were this. First, we mapped out what is the community, and then we asked the residents, okay, go out and take 5 photographs of something in the community that you're proud of. That answers the question of what does it mean to be Latino, that you're proud of. And then go take 5 areas of something that maybe you're not so proud of, right? And then 5 ideas of something that can change. And take these photographs, we're going to collect them, we're going to organize them, we're going to do an analysis of them, and we're going to represent them, and you're going to have this then walk on. I'm not going to go through the whole, it was this long report, and they used this PowerPoint at the end that they had created and went and presented it to the Chamber of Commerce and other things to continue the narrative. Here's some of the photographs that they took. They identified things they were proud of: Latino-owned businesses, strong women business owners. They had many others. I'm skipping through. There were many others on things they were proud of. There were also many things that they were concerned about: trash accumulation. So weirdly enough, I'm now working on a project, a Participatory Action Research project in the Point neighborhood in Salem on rats and trash as a follow-up to this very project now 10 years later. So project continues. And they also identified the hate speech. How do people talk about, the Point is a neighborhood that's primarily Latino neighborhood in Salem. And they were identifying these, what were derogatory comments online on the Salem website around how people talk about the Point. So they saw this was an area of concern. And then lastly, things like the exchange. There's a whole group of ideas, of things that they could change. The exchange, they envisioned a social cafe in the Point neighborhood as a space that can serve coffee and pastries and allow people to access services, information, education, cultural operations, scholarships, anything that a newly arrived immigrant would need to know. Elzabella and Co. went on to found the Welcoming Immigrant Network. They have a space, El Spacio, in the Point neighborhood now, doing a lot of this work exactly as she identified and envisioned now a decade ago. And we're continuing to work, I'm also continuing to work with Elzabella and the Latino Leadership Coalition now. We're doing a series of oral histories in Salem, which we're going to include as videos, a documentary film. We've reached out to a friend of ours who's some of you know Jenny Alexandra, who's maybe will be working with them. But they've collected 15 videos. I have my students who are doing an analysis of them. They're doing a community map of this in the North Shore Policy Lab to present this as part of the 400 plus anniversary of the city of Salem, which is going to be a big celebration a year from now. So again, this idea of how do we change the narrative through this approach. And you have something else.
Great. This is the last example we're going to give. It's a long one. It's like a 4-year process. So I'm going to make it really short because we want you to start working at the tables. After Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson in August of 2014, I was working at ECHO. It's a community organizing group. And the Black congregations that were members said, you know, this is not just Ferguson. This is here in Lynn. And sure enough, we did some research, and Lynn ranked in the top 10 worst cities for racial profiling in the state. There was quantitative research by a professor at Salem State, a criminologist, but there was no qualitative research. And every time we met with the police chief, the one with the red tie, who is now the sheriff of Essex County, Coppinger, he kept saying, no, he had all of this data saying there was no racial profiling in the city. And our people had experience of police brutality, of being beat up, of being harassed, like, oh, so many examples. But it was just like hearsay, not collected in a systematic way. And so we decided within this larger, and this is something that I want to be very clear, that PAR is just one tool within a larger campaign of organizing, that you're using many, many tools to do your organizing. PAR is one way, because sometimes there's information or knowledge you need to advance, and you don't have that. In our cases, in this particular campaign, and the goal was to get implicit bias, to go into the police department and train every single officer in implicit bias. That was our goal. We couldn't get in. Well, we could have meetings with the chief, but that's it. And so we decided to train people to do interviews, and our goal was to get 100 interviews. It was much harder than we thought because people are actually afraid to talk. And people in our churches, like the young men, aren't going to church. And so then we couldn't find it. So then we had to start going, the leaders in the churches had to go to barbershops, basketball courts, other places where the young men could be interviewed. But we were successful, and we trained every single police officer. This was, I guess it was July 14, 2016. It was in the Lynn newspaper. We were allowed in and did a day-long training of every police officer in the city of Lynn. That's Reverend Adrian Barry. Yeah, do you know? Yeah, she
married me and my husband.
Oh.
She used to be at UMass Boston.
Okay, yeah. So Reverend Adrian was one of the leaders, and in the previous, there's the Reverend Dr. Kirk Jones and Reverend Viola. So there was a bunch of Black ministers. And then we kept going after we won that, and we got body cameras, and then we got an unarmed crisis response team. So when there's a mental health emergency, they don't call the police. They call professionals so that nobody gets killed. And this was a few years ago. Now they've continued. I've left ECHO, but they've continued.
Just the word, because I know you went very quickly, but the approach that you took in ECHO and the group took in ECHO, could you just say a little bit about that? Because we're going to be doing that next, aren't we?
So one of the things that we did when we were really stuck, we had been doing every type of immigrant organizing tactic that you all know, and we weren't getting anywhere, and we decided to use a problem-solving tool called the question formulation technique. It is like a hammer or a screwdriver. A hammer, you can do many things with a hammer, right? So in this case, in that particular case, we used it to problem solve the fact that we had done research, we had done actions. We were at a kind of a block. And we set the problem before us, and then we interrogated it using this methodology. And through that, it basically, we had been asking, our request to the police chief was, will you conduct implicit bias training? one. And two, will you invite us to it? Because research shows across the country that when community members are training with police officers and talking to police officers, talking to people in the training, they get a better sense of how people experience their policing. So it's better that police train with community together in the same room. And so basically we were saying, do the training and invite us to it. And through this question formulation technique, after 2 hours and about 45 people participating, there was like over 300 questions. One question just like glowed. Everybody was like, huh. And the question was, somebody asked, instead of us inviting ourselves to their training, why don't we have a training and invite them to ours? And it's like, so simple. Could that work? Could it work? We're like, well, let's give it a try. And that led to I wrote an academic paper about it, and Rodrigo said he's read it, so we can share the paper with you. But that was the turning point using, and in fact, when we decided to hold it, we had a meeting with him. We did a number of other things that were a little, because you make one decision and then a whole other decisions are shifted because of that one decision, right? So we had to do things differently, and he said yes, and then we had the training, but it was because of the QFT. Do you want to learn the QFT?
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's learn it right now. All right, so you don't have to move quite yet. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, this is the most important thing I've ever learned in my life. And Kayla, being a student of mine, knows that that's true. I say it to all my students too. I think it is the most important thing I've ever learned because it's the most extraordinary tool. It is one of the things I like about it is so really simple. Look at the rules. The rules are ask as many questions as you can. Easy, right? 2, this is the hard one. Do not stop to answer, judge, or discuss the questions. That's really hard. So I'm going to be walking around, and if you're making a statement, I'm going to say, oh, can you please make that into a question, please? And you can do that to each other. 3, write, and this is super important. I'll tell you afterwards why. So one of you should be a scribe, and that person should write down the question exactly as it's stated. Exactly as it's stated. You know how like when you were in school and the teacher asked a question and then you answered it and then the teacher repeated it but shifted it a little bit because your question it's right but not quite the way she wanted it. And it's like you feel like, oh, well, I didn't get it quite right. So we want to honor everyone's thoughts and everyone's questions just as they ask them. So write it down just as they're asked. Change any statements into questions. And the scribe, you should number your questions because you're going to be doing stuff to the questions. And it's easier to just say number 4. Otherwise, you have to read the whole question. So number them. Is it clear? Yeah, OK. What are you going to ask questions about? Oh, wrong way. This is your question focus. The question focus is the problem. So with my police example, we had a question focus that was about that Coppinger wouldn't listen to us. So this is the question focus. Over the past 7 weeks, there has been reports of ICE presence in your community. ICE has taken individuals into custody. That is the problem. It is a very real one. So please go to the tables. And there's paper already on the table. And you may want to, maybe because this is so far away from the tables, maybe you want to write this at the top. The question? The question focus. Maybe you might write it at the top. And then as soon as you write it, start asking questions. Oh, that's good. Take a picture of it and bring it over with you. Yeah, good. I'm going to give you 10 minutes, and I would like you to get 15 questions in 10 minutes. Do you think you can do it? Maybe, yes, yes? All right.
just to wrap up, we just want to kind of gather it. You've all just participated in most of the QFT process, the question formulation technique process, in which we started by, what, brainstorming questions in response to a prompt. Right? Just brainstorming, question, question, question. And then you followed that with understanding what were open-ended, what were closed-ended questions, changing some of the questions as needed. And then from there, you changed what you were doing. You moved into defining the top 3 questions. And from that, you chose the number 1 question of the first round. And we did it all again. You did it a second time, a second round. And the second round, for some of you, I heard you say, it's a little harder now. Right? So you went through, you did it again, you identified another 3, and from those 3, everyone now has 1 question. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's what we've done. Now I'm going to turn it back over to...
Thank you. When we do this in communities, it is you saw the facilitators. We had no influence on the content. We gave you some structure and some steps, but when communities do this, they get to define usually the actual problem because it's their problem, and then they're just following the steps, but they get to define the questions. But even perhaps more importantly, all of you, when you had to choose 3 and then 1, you had to negotiate between each other. And implicit was developing criteria of how to evaluate them. So the community people are the ones defining the criteria for which questions are the most important. And they may not think of it that way, but that's exactly what they're doing. And one of the beauties, I was trained in this in 1998. So I've been doing QFT for many, many years. And it doesn't matter whether I learned it while I was in an adult learning center working with people who were either ESOL students or GED students or adult basic ed, limited literacy. And so people who were very brilliant but had very little opportunities for formal school. And it always is the same, no matter what people's formal education. It goes from questions that are kind of straightforward and micro level to macro level, structural and systemic questions. And it's not because people have been trained that way. It is because the human brain is wired that way. We are rational beings. And so it leverages, if you read the books by the people who made it, it leverages both convergent thinking and divergent thinking and metacognition. So it's very interesting. For another day, we could do a longer training. Okay.
What day?
So this would be for the next day. The next steps would be to take your top questions, your priority questions, and develop a research action plan. And this is the slide we'd use, like what do you need to know in order to answer those top questions? And it probably is not just that one, maybe you would choose 5 or 6 that you want answered. What do you need to know? What are the tasks? And then, research has some basic tasks that you would grab. And so I have joined the QFT, which has nothing to do with PAR, but it is a good process to ask questions to PAR. So most PAR researchers do not use QFT because they don't know QFT. But I have kind of married the 2 of them together. So the folks that developed the QFT is Dan Rothstein and Lou Santana. And this is what they like. In this tool, this is the end, and this will be our last slide. The reflection, and I think it's always really important to do it. So I'd like to ask you right now, what did you learn? Doing the QFT, what did you learn? Yes?
We're invested in each other.
Oh, did anybody hear that? That is such a beautiful, thank you. We're invested in each other. Yes?
It was like, we started to get to know each other, we're beginning to build relationships and trust. But also I learned that it's actually really hard to ask a question, maybe because we're in a society that tells you we should know already, we should already have answers.
Or if you don't have the answers, you don't need them.
Right. Or act like you have them.
Yeah. Yeah, but at the same time, there's a lot of questions.
A lot of questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
I learned how different people in my team were thinking about the problem.
Yeah, thank you. What else? What else did you learn? Yes, Kayla.
And this is partially learning, but also a feeling of even if you don't know about a particular problem focus, this is still a good opportunity to learn about that problem focus. Even in asking questions, while you're provided no answer, you still learn more in your question asking.
A lot of times people will say, I don't know much about that. And I feel like when you don't know a lot about a subject, you will ask fundamental questions that are overlooked by people who are experts because they know too much. So they won't ask those like basic questions. And sometimes you need basic questions about the problem. But if you know a lot about the problem, you won't ask basic questions. So it's really good to have people who don't know anything about what's going on in your group. Yes?
I was just saying, like, kind of along with we're like in the same team, wanting like having the same goal, but everybody's thinking about it different. It's just about like tuning in to like the direction that we want to like go into.
Yeah. Thank you. Gloribel?
Yeah, I found it hard not to debate about the question. And I was like, oh my God, I'm catching myself. So it was just like, yeah, just how to just let it all come out and not have a critique or an idea or
Yeah, it's really hard. And Sergio said to someone, that's a great question. And so I heard him from far away, so I walked over to him and I said, I asked you not to judge the question. And Sergio's eyes are like, oh, that was a good judgment. I said, yes. Because if you're working in the community and you ask a question, I say, oh, that's a good question. And then I didn't say anything about you.
Right.
There are two questions on this.
Well, just to that.
Oh, and your kid.
I'm sorry, just to that point, like Dan was the only male presenting person in our group and only asked a couple of questions. And I remember thinking to myself, I should really invite him to ask a question, but then I kept having questions. So maybe the person who was in the minority is easily silenced, and we may not even recognize that because we're just so energized in the moment. So we have to maybe invite one another?
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Yep. I think it's good to invite. If you're noticing that, that makes sense. Yeah, you had your hand up.
I was just going back to you had given an example, about doing the training for police and inviting them into your training, but that those trainings are more effective when there's police who are experts in the field, in quotes, and people who are from the community who are experts in a different field, but you're bringing them together. And I've been in groups where really like inter-age or people from really different backgrounds just help get to some of those otherwise overlooked questions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay.
I think for me,
yes.
It was like the importance of wording and getting down to the root of a question, more importantly of an answer as well.
Yeah.
I think that really makes me think of like how, even within like legal questions that you're asked by like an officer or something, there's specific wording that is intended to hold power, and there's a specific power that is to be found in the formulation of the question to get to the bottom of the problem.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Can it get heated at this point ever, like as facilitators? Like are people arguing over which the best question or whatever?
I've never seen arguing, differing, but everybody's working on the same problem, and it's usually a community.
I've also had, the times I've done it with students and others, they've said that the act of asking questions builds a sort of sense of common problem solving that's leads to less arguing and kind of tensions. And so I don't know, there still might be potential for people to.
Yeah, people have said it builds solidarity and community. Oftentimes people laugh. Is your hand, did you?
Oh yeah, something I was learning was that I feel like I was sitting with a question and it took me multiple rounds of, because the way we did it is we went one by one in a round.
Oh,
and so it took me multiple rounds to get to the actual question I felt I was trying to ask.
Yeah.
And just this piece about like sitting with something or like trying to just say it over and over again
Yeah.
to get to like what the root is in some
Mm.
ways, or like maybe arriving at the actual question I'm trying to ask. It takes a
Yeah.
while. I'm
Yeah.
learning about myself. You know, it's not like
Yeah.
I know the question. But
Right,
it's
right,
like
right.
it takes a while to
Interesting.
actually get
Yeah,
there.
yeah, that's beautiful.
And that's kind of how did you learn?
Yeah, so maybe it moves into the next question is, how did you learn what you learned? So I first asked you, what did you learn and how did you learn it? So that was great to begin with that. Can anybody answer that? How did you learn what you learned?
I think it was curiosity, so sort of putting you in the space of curiosity, which I think is why it's hard to sort of be curious and to argue with someone, like sort of building off what was last. I think like when you're curious, it's not, you're in a different headspace.
Yep, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I think for me, it's like through the process of figuring out which question is like the priority. I think that's really how it comes about, that you find the wording is very important.
Okay, yeah, thank you. All right. And then we could have a conversation about what do you understand differently now, and then you just change that last part about whatever it is you're working on. So I just changed it a little bit. But what do you understand differently now?
One thing that is coming up for me in all of this is what you mentioned about questions having power, holding power, or the people who are asking questions are exercising power. But I also feel like questioning is inherently vulnerable because it demonstrates things you might not know, or puts you on like a more kind of offensive position rather than a defensive position. And so I'm kind of, I don't know that I understand it, but I'm wrestling with this like balance between power and vulnerability in question asking.
Interesting. Yeah. Right. I wanted to end with, we started with power. I want to end with power. So this is a graph of children from 1-year-old to 18-year-olds. And the dark blue is writing skill, right? So around 5 years old, they go to school, and their writing goes up, up, up. And the light blue is reading skill. So as we might expect, as they go through school, children learn to read and write. This is US data. The orange line is the ability to ask questions. When does it peak?
4 and 5.
Now, how old is your daughter?
Our son is 3 he's like, ¿cómo?
Like, you've all been with a 3-year-old. Like, you cannot stop them from asking questions. Human beings are born hardwired to ask questions. And then they go to school.
Yeah, until they go to...
And then they go to school, and we beat it out of them. We do everything. By the age of 18, kids don't even know how to ask questions. In whose interest is this? Who benefits from this?
The American dream.
The American dream.
Well, everybody but the kid. And everybody who's setting the rules for a kid to follow.
The third dimension, in some ways.
The third dimension?
The second dimension.
The second dimension? Those in power. If we had a population that knew how to ask questions, I'm not sure Trump would be in power right now. Right? The powerful stay in power. It's dependent on us not asking questions. So, to the extent that asking questions and asking research questions and developing research is the opposite of this, right? We're exercising power. So maybe I should hand it over. I want to say thank you, and then hand it over to Tom. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, and just the last quote. Rosa Parks, Septima Clark, at the Freedom Schools, and asked, we need to be taught to study rather than to believe, to inquire rather than to affirm. So much of what we're talking about here is how do we ask questions, how do we inquire? And this is the basic building block of democracy, as we were saying. If we want a democracy, we have to be able to ask questions, we have to be able to gather knowledge. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for letting us stay late.